And this show is about relationships, and I'm going to share with you a personal testimony. Welcome to Morning Coffee. So I will talk about the relationship I have with my wife, but it's a rather unique story. And where it begins is at a time when the United States was very fearful of illegal aliens. And when was that? During the tragedies of 9/11. So we all remember that day in September 11th at 9 o'clock in the morning or shortly thereafter in New York City, where we were attacked by terrorists. I only bring it up not to bring up a sad story, but just to set the stage of what it was like when I met my wife, which was 6 months later. So as America was still healing from the wounds of that and also putting into their mind the protective defenses against illegal aliens, that is when I met my wife, who at the time was an illegal alien. She's a United States citizen now, but I met her as an illegal alien. So how did it all start? In late February, I was working at a job and I met someone who I became very friendly with at the job. And about 2 weeks after knowing him, he wanted me to meet a cousin of his. And at the time, I didn't want to meet someone. I was just in a place in my life. I was fine where I was. It was just me and the two cats, and that's all it was. I was taking care of my brother's cats. So I was fine with that. And so I dropped the subject. The next day, he brings her up again. And I said, I thought you were kidding. And he said, no, I want you to meet her. So I said, okay, I'll meet her. So this was in 2002, March 30th. And this was at my friend's son's birthday party at his house. And so not only did I meet my wife-to-be at the time, or a stranger to me at the time, but my wife later, I would meet everyone else, except her parents were still in the country of Colombia. So I met my friend Herman February 24th in the year 2002. I was at his house at a birthday party March 30th. So about a month later, I'm meeting who would later become my wife for the very first time. Now, this is in March 30th of 2002, about 6 months after 9/11. So I'm going to make a long story short. She did not speak English, and she was an illegal alien. 4 months after I met her, on my birthday, on August 10th, I proposed to her. She accepted. August 10th is a month, almost to the day, before 9/11. So you can imagine that first 1 year anniversary and also the month leading up to it, that was all over the news. So that was still very fresh in people's minds. And, but I proposed to her. And then we got married on October 19th. It was going to be October 12th, but it was raining that day, and this was an outdoor wedding. So October 12th, that's almost, that's a month to the day right after, a month after, I should say, the 1 year anniversary. But we got married on the 19th instead. So from the time I met her 4 months later, I proposed to her. 2 months after that, we were married. That was 16 years ago. So I was thinking of telling you this story only because very good friends of mine and my wife are renewing their vows tomorrow. They've been married for 20 years, and they're renewing their vows tomorrow. So it made me think about on this program to share a little bit about our story. So let's talk about what are some of the things that makes a relationship last. Okay, the first thing you want to do is to scrap the blueprint, scrap the script. So what does that mean? This just means you can't plan a relationship. If you try to do this, you're just going to fail because there's two people involved. Once you become married and joined as one, not two, but as one, then it's no longer about you. It's the new entity of husband and wife. That being said, brings me to my second point. You need to forgive. Because for you to be able to forgive your spouse, you're also forgiving yourself because you're married as one. And when you read the vows or go through the vows in marriage, it talks about being married in unity. So that's what we're talking about. So there is that element of forgiveness because to forgive your spouse, you are also forgiving yourself because you're a team, which brings me up to the third point. Be a good teammate. Being in a relationship is a two-person job, okay? And you need to be able to share. One of the things that I did was, I'll give one simple example, is we were working on my wife's citizenship. And so I'm very much involved with that whole naturalization process. And I remember from where we were living going to Boston, the 2-hour drive into Boston on a rainy day, we were standing in line at the JFK building for an hour and a half or 2 hours. It was well over an hour, but it was so many years ago. So this was back in 2008, and I'm doing this broadcast 10 years later, 2018. But I distinctly remember standing in the rain. So that whole process involved standing in the rain. So that's what we're talking about, being a good teammate. You sacrifice. So this includes doing generous work with each other and not being the only one to contribute and not being the only one to receive. That being said, that brings me up to my fourth point. That is to grow together. Grow together. It's very important to grow together as a couple. Notice I say a couple. That A means one. Again, we're talking about marriage is one. Once you are married, it's no longer about you. It's no longer about your spouse. It's about the two of you together, okay? So that's what's important. If you're going to be with someone, who are you going to be joined with and mold together with, rather than, oh, this person looks like they can be fun. That's not a couple. That's me and them, you and them. So you grow as a couple by spending time just talking and bonding with each other. We hear that word, talking and bonding with each other. Think of that word bonding. Think of it as glue. That means being firm together, stuck together like super glue. So that's what a marriage is. You are bond together, just like using super glue. If you can't grow or learn to grow in your relationship, it's not going to last. So for that to happen brings me up to my fifth point. You need to adapt. As I said before, it's no longer about you. You obviously don't expect to have all of the same ideas and beliefs. I'll give you a testimony. Very embarrassed to tell you. Many, many years ago, I used to be a heavy drinker of beer. I was what one would call a functioning alcoholic. As I adapted and changed, as I became bond together in a married relationship, I changed. I stopped drinking cold turkey. My wife and I are very avid participants and also leaders in our church. Now, before I met my wife, would I ever think that to happen? No. As a matter of fact, I made it very clear that there would be no way I'd be able to stop drinking on myself. I'm a better person because of it. But that's because I adapted, I changed. I was accepting and willing. And that's why I'm able to provide this broadcast to you today. If you care about your relationship, then this step should come pretty easy because, as I say, in your adaptation, you change in a way that it's not just about yourself, it's about the bonding and the unity of the couple. So just like as a child, as you learned about yourself, now as an adult, you learn about the new living being called a married couple. Okay, so that's when you learn about the little quirks about your spouse and you adapt with them. Just like when you were in your adolescence or even younger, you noticed things and you had to adapt. So that's another way of evolving and growing. It requires a change so that you can adapt to be a married be developed into a married couple. Now you're still a person, so do develop your own interests. Okay, a lot of the things I like to enjoy has to do with my profession. It's not related to what my wife enjoys, although she participates in it. On my speaking tour, as I traveled the 7 states of New York and New England to 52 locations for 11 years, many times she would travel with me and she would participate in it. But she knew that was something that was mine because it was part of my profession and part of something that I enjoy doing. I like to collect model cars. And I haven't got any new ones lately, but that's something that I still have on display. That's part of my identity because I have a fascination with cars. Okay. Let's talk about the 7th piece of advice. Don't keep score. If you're keeping score as to who did what to who, then you're just bottling up anger inside. And what happens when you bottle up anger inside? It turns into a volcano that explodes. Does a volcano do any good for anyone? No, it doesn't. That goes back to the notion of forgiveness, okay? Relationships are not a game, so there's no reason to keep score. This means if you do something nice for your partner or something like that, that doesn't mean you're one up on them and they owe you. That's not how it works because you as an individual don't keep score with yourself. So as a unity, a couple that is bonded together, it's the same. You wouldn't have a need to keep score anyways. So here's the tip. Don't keep score. So let's go to my 8th one. Practice this self-awareness. When you're in a relationship, you usually try to do whatever you can do to make the other person happy. Well, it's to make the person happy, it's not to look at them, it's to look at yourself. Okay? If there's something happening in a relationship, don't blame the other person. Chances are the person to blame is yourself. And even if it's not fully yourself, that's the one thing you can change. In life, in general, I'm speaking in general now, you can't change another person's attitude, habits, or behaviors. But you can do it to yourself. So, practice that self-awareness. Think of what you can do to improve yourself so that you're a better fit for the relationship that you're in. Okay? And let's now go to my 9th tip, which is to cultivate your finer qualities. Okay? Work on the qualities that make you a better person. Do more of what works and less of what doesn't. I'll give you an example. I'm a hard worker. That's a good quality. It makes me a good provider in the relationship and the family that I'm in. So I improve upon that. Many, many years ago, I used to drink alcohol. I didn't improve in that area. I worked on getting rid of that. And it's been gone for many years. Okay? So that's what you want to do. When you get to the point like I did that I can admit that I did something wrong many years ago, then I know I'm not going to fall back to that. If I was too afraid to admit that, then the chances are I'm aware that I might go back to that. Use that for yourself. If you have a failing or something you want to improve upon, but you're not comfortable admitting it, well, then chances are you can stick to that or fall back into that. So that's an example of more self-awareness. So do what works best in a relationship. Do less of what doesn't. Okay? It can be easy to do this in a relationship because there are always opportunities to practice the finer qualities that you have. An example is loyalty, compassion, trust. I'll say that again. Those are great qualities to have in a relationship. That's part of that bonding and the gluing. It's the loyalty to your partner, the compassion that you have with your spouse, and the trust that holds together a married couple. So now let's go to number 10. Because you are a married couple, if one falls, that means the other one gets pulled down also. If one lifts up the other, then both are lifted up. What do I mean by that? Encourage each other, okay? No one wants to feel held back from doing certain things. For example, when you're raising children, you need to have both of you working together, encourage each other, help each other. Don't point fingers. Don't use verbal jabs. Because if you push away that help and you don't get that help, then you've lost half of your processing power. You don't want that. You need to do whatever it takes to uplift your spouse or your partner or your boyfriend or your girlfriend. You need to encourage them. Because by encouraging them, you as a bonded unit, I should say, are that much stronger. Because when you encourage someone else in your relationship, you're also encouraging yourself. Because that other person is part of you. Which brings me to number 11. Offer solutions, not criticisms. Problems don't help anything. With every relationship, there are ups and downs. And during the downs, encourage to make them up. Don't make them down by offering criticisms. Offer solutions, okay? Because whatever solution you have, the success of that solution makes the couple stronger. I'll give you an example. And I use this acronym for something totally different, but I'll use it here. And it's called Drive Your Car to Success. In every relationship, there's a challenge. So what you need to do is think of the action. And the result of the action. So what do I mean by that? You have a challenge, you need to perform an action, and you want a positive result. That's a solution. That's CAR, challenge, action, end result. That's what we need. We need positive to build. The negative pulls down. If your partner is pulled down, then you're pulled down too, because they'll take you down with you. Okay? Which brings me to 12. Complement each other. Speaking power, I should say, speaking in the positive is power. That's what I was trying to say. Speaking in the positive is power. Speaking in the negative is power, like criticism. So give your relationship power, because if you give positive fuel to your partner, to your wife, to your husband, to your boyfriend, to your girlfriend, if you give positive input to your partner, then in turn, that positive input goes to you, because you and your partner are one. Again, I keep going back to that. All of these tips and suggestions I'm talking about are related to you and your partner as one, not him and her, this person and that person. It's one. So whatever you do in the positive will mirror back to you, because when you speak to the positive to your partner, you're also doing it for yourself. But again, as I talked about before, we are individuals, which brings me to tip number 13. Respect space and time. Now, I know I've been talking about unity and bonding as one, but I'm going to use the example as is discussed in the Bible, the marriage between a man and a woman. Men and women aren't the same. It's even outlined in the Bible thousands of years ago that men and women are different. Okay? The hormonal activities, they're different. The nature of the different sexes makes people different. Given that, your spouse, your boyfriend, your girlfriend may at times need some space and time. Now, that doesn't mean 2 years away in another country. I don't mean that. But just being mindful and respectful by the choice of words you use, the actions you take, because whatever comes out of your mouth is what you've been thinking about. Make sure that it's in the positive, but also there's a time and place of when to say something. And sometimes you need to respect space and time. Okay? And that will help your relationship grow by giving each other some space. Okay? Now I'll go to tip number 14. A simple thank you. We learn as children to say thank you. We can still do that when we're adults. It's a very powerful word. Thank you is the verbal notion of gratitude. Gratitude has powerful energy. Take that energy and put it into your relationship and show kindness and consideration along with that gratitude by remembering to say thank you. You know, many times people don't want money and fame, and I exaggerate, but I think you understand the point when I'm saying that sometimes all people are waiting to hear is a thank you, is an acknowledgement. That's what the thank you is for, an acknowledgement that they did okay. Okay? And at the same time, bringing me to number 15, admit when you are wrong. Okay? Nobody's perfect. Okay? Don't be narcissistic. Okay? Admit when you are wrong. And that's another example of acknowledgement. Thank you is an acknowledgement of appreciation. Admitting when you are wrong is an acknowledgement. If you can say you are wrong, if you can take that out of your mouth and actually speak it, it means you're going to make changes to correct it. And that goes a long way. You might even receive a thank you for that. Because by admitting that you're wrong is an acknowledgement that you know the difference between right and wrong. Therefore, you're going to do something to go to the right. Okay? So we talk about saying thank you, which is tip number 14. Tip number 15, admitting when you're wrong. Let's go to 16. Don't be afraid to speak your mind. Okay? And what I mean by that is I don't mean to yell and scream. All I mean is don't bottle anger inside. Speak your mind early enough before it turns into anger. When emotions are held up inside, violent behavior occurs. Verbal abuse is sometimes considered just as bad or worse than physical abuse. So prevent that. Be early on in giving your opinions. And if you speak your mind early enough before it gets bottled up and turns into anger, then you can really save the relationship. Because then, as a couple, the two of you can solve the problem. And an example is when you speak your mind, the other person might admit that they're wrong, which was the previous tip. Tip 15, admit that you're wrong. Tip 16, don't be afraid to speak your mind. And the other one is number 18. We all have friends. We all have connections. Respect the connections and the friends and the colleagues and the coworkers that your spouse or your partner has. Okay? Because each person, when they select a friend, they've built a trust. If you don't like your spouse's friends and you verbalize that, then you are impacting the trust that your spouse or partner has with their friends. That means you may not trust your spouse or partner because you don't trust the selections of friends that your partner or spouse has. So be respectful. It doesn't mean you have to like them. What I mean by just be mindful and respectful. And what I mean by that is choose your words wisely, because what you say has power. We talked about that before. The next one, number 19, tip number 19, is be affectionate. Be affectionate. I think I missed tip 17. I think I only had 19. But the next one was be affectionate. Okay? People like to be nurtured. You know, when we were kids, that's how we're born into in our parents' arms. We received affection. People don't change in that regard. We always want affection. Show that. And the last tip is to mind your manners. Mind your manners. Again, it goes back to being mindful and respectful and being polite. Okay, that goes back to how you behave and how you speak. So those are some of the tips. Those are some of the tips. In other broadcasts, I'll probably share some more, but I wanted to share some of these with you just in celebration of two very close friends of mine who are renewing their vows tomorrow after 20 years of marriage. My wife and I, we renewed our vows in 2015, about 3 years ago. So we've been married at this point, as of this broadcast, 16 years. So about 12, 13 years we had been married by the time we had renewed our vows. So who knows? We might do it again. So anyways, that is my conversation about relationships and how to make them stronger. And I wish for all of you that all of you have the same blessings that my wife and I have had for the many years that we have been married. My name is David Ewan, and this is Morning Coffee.